This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Aloha, and welcome to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education, as we've grown to become one of the largest all-volunteer, nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. I'd like to encourage those of you who are not yet members, and even those of you who are not yet vegetarian, to join the Vegetarian Society tonight. You'll receive an informative newsletter, as well as discounts on Oahu, Maui, Kauai, and the Big Island at many vegan and vegetarian-friendly restaurants, businesses, and groceries, such as at down-to-earth, organic, and natural stores. Please remember that if you spend just $10 a week in groceries or eating out, you'll be saving money with your membership. You'll also be supporting events such as tonight's, which are not only made possible, but free to the community as well through your membership dues and donations, for which we are very, very grateful. VSH members and friends can also enjoy popular social events, such as our VSH Speakers Dine Out, which will be tomorrow from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. with our March speaker, Zoe Weil, at Govinda's Vegetarian Buffet. There'll probably be great weather, so we'll be dining outdoors under this giant banyan tree on a great lawn. You're also welcome to come to our free Imagine a Vegan World support group meetings at 6:30 p.m. every Tuesday night, except when we're having a lecture like this, at the Central YMCA on Atkinson Drive. Please see Terry Bear for details. Terry, there she is. At this time, I'd also like to recognize some of our hardworking volunteers. We have Dr. Carl Seff, our UH Professor Emeritus of Chemistry, who arranges our meeting schedule, does everything else from bringing our refreshments donations, cleaning up afterwards, and still manages to bring a lovely lei for our speaker too. Also, Dr. Fred Foster, who is at the reception. Phyllis is helping out there too. Phyllis Fong, thank you. And we have Patrick and Cyrilak at the free literature table. James Richard, doing everything you can imagine, and we want to tell him thank you very much. Patrick Conair, who distributes our flyers everywhere. Matt Gisa, who does our Facebook page. Thank you so much. Now, if you'd like to join this great group of volunteers and having fun while making a positive contribution to the world, please see me before you go tonight. We're recording tonight's presentation for broadcast on the VSH TV series Vegetarian, which appears on public access channels across the state, including on Oahu's Olelo Oceanic Channel 53 and Hawaiian Telecom Channel 52 on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. and on some Wednesdays at 6 p.m. You can also view videos of this presentation and many of our other past presentations on our website, www.vsh.org, where you'll find many other resources, including our famous dining guide. It's now time for our special guest. We're delighted to welcome Zoe Weil. Zoe Weil is the co-founder and president of the Institute for Humane Education. She's the author of several books, including the Nautilus Silver Medal winner, Most Good, Least Harm, A Simple Principle for a Better World and Meaningful Life. She has written numerous articles on humane education and humane living. She speaks frequently and leads workshops across North America and overseas, and has been interviewed in such venues as Forbes.com. She has also presented 6 acclaimed TEDx talks. Zoe has been honored with the Award for Women in Environmental Leadership from Unity College and has been invested into the Animal Rights Hall of Fame. She has had her portrait painted for the Americans Who Tell the Truth series. Zoe lives in Surrey, Maine, and has a husband, son, 3 rescued dogs, and a rescued cat. Zoe Weil's presentation tonight is entitled, Doing the Most Good and Least Harm When You Eat. Please join me in welcoming Zoe Weil.
You may kiss the bride. Okay, still. Hair goes where, pull it out. If it's not right.
There we go. This is going to be so distracting because this smells so amazingly good. What is this? What is the flower? Ginger? Wow. It's really, really such a pleasure to be here. And it has taken a year's worth of planning from the Mogalea women, Victoria, Linda, Andrea, and Terry, and Lorraine, who invited me here today to speak with all of you. Thank you all so much for bringing me here. I'm really, really glad to be here. So before I begin my presentation, I'm going to need 2 volunteers who are willing to take off their shoes and socks. Probably most of you don't have socks because you're from Hawaii, not Maine, where I'm from. And you're going to stand side by side on these 2 crates that I have up here. So, do I have 2 volunteers? Right there, come on up. What are your names?
My name's Brian.
Brian?
And Kristen.
Kristen. Okay, if you could stand side by side, and I'm going to just go on with my presentation while you 2 are there. And so you're just going to stay there while I'm talking, and if for any reason you need to get off to take care of yourself, just go ahead and get off. I am going to explain what they're doing, but not for a while. Okay.
What did I sign up for?
What did you sign up for? Okay, so hopefully they won't be too distracting while I tell you about Sarah. So you've been seeing this image of this chimpanzee since we began, and this is Sarah. And 29 years ago, I volunteered for a researcher who was teaching Sarah a symbolic language. I'd read about her in my psychology textbook in college, and some of you who've ever taken psychology in college have probably read about Sarah too. She's quite famous because of her extraordinary ability to communicate with humans through this symbolic language. And when I read about her, I thought that it would be fascinating to work with her. So I contacted the researcher and I asked if I could volunteer, and he said yes. So when I arrived, I was introduced to the 4 3-year-old chimpanzees with whom I would be working. And when it was time to meet Sarah, I was told that Sarah might behave, well, literally have a temper tantrum. That's what I was told when I went in to meet her. And to just stay away from her cage, and we would see how she would react. But she sometimes reacted this way to new people. Well, sure enough, when we went in, Sarah literally began screaming and jumping off the walls, which was quite disturbing. I mean, here's this chimpanzee I'd read about in these studies that I thought were so benign and really quite amazing. Well, the next week when I went back and I visited Sarah, she had calmed down, and I had been instructed not to get within 5 feet of the bars of her cage because she was strong enough that she could grab my arm and literally pull it right out of its socket. So I stood back, probably about as far away as I am from you, and I said, and she came right up. She came right up to me, and she stared into my eyes. And not knowing if she would understand me, I said, Sarah, turn around and I'll scratch your back. Well, sure enough, Sarah turned around and she pressed her back against the bars of the cage, and she sank down to sit down on the floor, and I walked up and I scratched her back. Now, Sarah was no longer participating in language studies. She had behaved in an aggressive way toward one of her trainers a few years earlier, and so now her only interactions with people or other chimpanzees were through the bars of her cage. Now, her cage was quite spacious, but it was still a cage. And I was quite shocked by this. Here was this amazing animal who had learned our language. She had been taken from her home in Africa. She had been moved from lab to lab. She had learned to communicate with human beings, and now she basically had a prison sentence with no interaction with anybody except through the bars of that cage. Well, I'm happy to say that all these years later, that was back in 1985, all these years later, Sarah is now living at Chimp Haven, and she's going to be able to remain there for the rest of her life. She now does live with other chimpanzees. She was not so far gone that she couldn't actually live with chimpanzees. She lives in a troop with them. So that's the good news. Now, why am I telling you about Sarah? We humans are one species among so many millions of others. We share this extraordinary planet with more animals than we can even name. Some of them we experiment on, some we wear, some we eat, some we use to entertain ourselves, some we love, and some we vilify. Now, we're particularly fond of dogs. This is a photograph of two of my family's 3 rescued dogs. That's Ruby on the left and Elsie on the right. And why do we love dogs so much? Because we recognize their capacity to interact with us, to be our friends. And we recognize in them some of the qualities we love most in ourselves, like loyalty and devotion and love and friendliness and fun. But dogs also experience plenty of other emotions we recognize too, like jealousy and fear and sorrow. We recognize that they are alike us, and we love them, and so we have laws to protect them, at least the ones we call pets, as opposed to the ones that we experiment on. So, how many of you have a dog or a cat at home? Okay, a lot of you. So it would be illegal for any of you to go home and to press a burning hot iron into the flesh of your dog or cat to leave a permanent mark. And if you were caught, you could be charged with criminal cruelty. But it's perfectly legal to do that to other animals able to feel just as much as dogs and cats. We even have a name for it. What's the name? Branding. You all knew it, branding. And we do it routinely to millions of cows. It would also be illegal for you to take your dog or cat and put that animal into a cage for the duration of his or her life that was so small that they could never turn around or stretch. Again, you would be charged with criminal cruelty. But it's perfectly legal to do to other animals, and it's done routinely. It's done routinely to mother pigs, forced to live in cages for their whole lives and deliver litter after litter of piglets who will be taken and raised and then killed for food by the time they're 6 months old, where their mothers are re-impregnated over and over, cycle, living out their lives in that kind of filth and squalor and breathing in the fumes from their accumulated waste, which they can never escape and which causes so many of them to suffer from lung disease, pneumonia. Now, be honest here. How many of you grew up thinking that cows spontaneously produced milk for people? Okay, that's a lot of you. So I grew up in New York City. I had no idea that cows didn't spontaneously produce milk for people. I thought that's what cows did, right? We drank their milk, they produced milk. But cows are mammals, like us, and like pigs, and like koalas, and giraffes. They only produce milk for one reason. What's that reason? To feed their babies. And so, in order to produce milk, they have to have a baby. And I never thought about this before. And then I learned that in order to drink milk, we took those babies away from their mothers on their very first day of life. And mother cows will often bellow out, sometimes for days, when their babies are essentially kidnapped from them so that we can take their milk. Now, any mothers in the room? Raise your hand if you're a mom. Okay, and raise your hand if you nursed your baby. Okay, lots of hands going up. Anybody here nurse twins? Anybody have twins? Okay, so for the mothers in the room, I have a question for you. Could you imagine if you did have twins, nursing both of them? Raise your hand if you could imagine that. I would have nursed both of them if I could have. Okay, but you're on the fence, right? What if I said quintuplets, 5 of them? Could you imagine that? Any moms here imagine that? You're not a mom. You're a guy. But I'm glad that you can imagine it. Okay, so the reason I asked that question, look at this cow's udder. Cows normally produce about 7 pounds of milk per day for their calf. And we have now forced them to produce about 10 times that amount, 70 pounds. That is equivalent to feeding 10 calves. But cows, like humans, normally have 1 calf, rarely twins. So we are forcing them to essentially nurse 10 calves. Imagine that. So it's no wonder that about half the cows in the United States wind up getting mastitis, which is a painful udder infection, necessitating the use of antibiotics. So, all of these things I didn't know. And when I learned, I wanted to make different choices. Now, you're probably wondering why I am subjecting these lovely people to this apparently inhumane activity. So let me just check in with you. How are you two doing?
Well, it's definitely uncomfortable.
I'm chilling.
You're chilling? Okay, so I would like you to just imagine that this extends around your entire body. So you can't, your arms are both by your sides, which is good because you wouldn't be able to move your arms any further. So how long do you think you'd like to stay there?
Less time than this.
So you've been a good sport. What about you?
None at all.
Not at all. Okay, well, thank you then for putting up with it for this long. So, maybe the reason why you don't want to stay there is because, I don't know, you're worried that you won't get food or something. So what if I said to you that we would get some food and water and, you would be able to have access to it all the time. You could just sort of suck on a tube and have access to it. And then if you have to go to the bathroom, you can just go. It'll fall through the slats in there. And so no worries in that department either. Then would you want to stay?
No.
That helps.
Interesting. Okay. So does anybody have, well, first, since you said you wouldn't want to stay here much longer, let's give them a hand. Wait, one more question, actually. If you did have to stay there for, let's say, a year, how do you think you'd start to feel about each other?
Oh, I would hate him so much.
I would not like her very much.
And you are a little bit bigger, so do you think you might resort to violence to? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then. Well, then I think it's time to let you get off. Can we give them a big hand, please? Thank you. How do your feet feel?
They only have fat grids in them.
Yes, that doesn't feel very good. Okay, anybody have any idea what I was having them pretend to be, or who I was having them pretend to be? Yes. Yes. So she was saying one of the animals that are confined in, these kinds of conditions. And she specifically mentioned chickens. And that's exactly who I was having them pretend to be, is egg-laying hens. So just like the dairy cows, I thought that egg-laying hens didn't suffer at all because this was a byproduct. They didn't have to be killed to produce eggs, just like a cow doesn't have to be killed to produce milk. But a cow who is forced to produce milk like this, have a baby year after year after year, eventually becomes so depleted she can't produce milk anymore, and then she's sent off to slaughter. Well, the egg-laying hens, their lives are probably the most brutal of all the animals raised for food. So even though eggs are a byproduct and it doesn't seem like an animal needs to be killed for them, the conditions under which they live are truly the worst of the worst. So this is one of the largest egg producers on the East Coast of the United States. And I took a couple of groups of students to visit this facility. And when we arrived, well, first, just arriving was an interesting thing. We had very good directions, thank goodness. This was a while ago. This was before, GPS. And so I actually had written directions about where to go. And when I arrived, I had no idea that I was on a farm, because all we saw were these big, long buildings the length of football fields that were just closed up. They just looked like warehouses. And when we went into the main entrance, we were overcome by this horrendous stench. And the source of the smell was completely mysterious, because the only thing that was in that room were some machines, a handful of people, and some cartons of eggs. And our guide eagerly gave us a tour of this room. He showed us how the eggs came through a hole in the wall on a conveyor belt, and they went through a machine that checked them with UV light to examine them for cracks, and then they were lifted up by a mechanical arm which weighed them and placed them into the appropriate egg carton. He was really proud of the fact that this facility was producing eggs for people up and down the entire eastern seaboard. But then when one of the students asked if we could see the hens, his face fell. And he said, "Yeah, but that's not as nice." And that's when he took us into this room. And as far as the eye could see, there were these stacked cages filled with these birds. It was a cacophony in there. It was deafening sound. And of course, that is where the stench came from. Now, as any of you who have ever been with chickens know, chickens do not smell bad. But their waste smells bad when it accumulates. And in this case, there was a year's worth of accumulated waste collected in giant piles under the cages. And in each building, in this building and in all the 4 other buildings, there were 100,000 birds. 100,000 birds. Their waste after a year. So that's where the smell came from. So I want to show you a close-up of one of the cages. There are 9 birds in that cage That cage is about maybe half the size of this table up here, different dimensions. And you can see how terrible they looked. Anybody have lived with chickens or have chickens at home? Okay, so a chicken's beak, what color is it chicken's comb, what color is it supposed to be? Red. Bright red. It's not supposed to be pink. This is not because my photography is not good, it was pink. A chicken's comb, how's it supposed to stand? Straight up, okay? It's not supposed to be flopped over. And of course, chickens are supposed to have their feathers. So look at these chickens. These are the conditions under which they live. Now you also might notice that their beaks look deformed. That's because half of their beaks were sliced off with a hot blade when they were newly hatched chicks. Why? So they won't peck each other to death under these conditions. And that's why I asked our 2 volunteers here how they would feel about each other. Because how would you feel if you had to live under these conditions? So, how would we know about this? We'd only know about this if somebody told us about this. Because you're certainly not going to find it out if you look at the egg cartons. This egg carton, describing the eggs as fabulously farm fresh, with a little image of a farmer with a corncob pipe and a chicken walking by his side, that egg carton was filled with eggs from the chickens you just saw. No truth in egg carton advertising. You're certainly not going to find this out from PR firms or spokespeople from the egg industry. Trent Luce, one such spokesperson, had this to say in the magazine Feedstuffs, quote, "A hen in a cage is not that much different from a traveler in a hotel with room service." So here again is another photo I took of hens from that same facility. And there's a photo of some travelers in a hotel with room service. So let's just check that out again. Hens in a cage, travelers in a hotel. I don't know about you, but I see a little bit of a difference. So, what do we do with all this information? Well, when I was young, probably like many people in this room, I loved animals. How many people sort of consider themselves animal lovers? Love animals? Okay, lots of you. So I was one of those people too. And when I was in high school, I had a friend who was a sheep. And I used to visit him regularly, and he would come running up to me and he'd lift up his chin so I could scratch him. And I just loved that sheep. And I also loved lamb chops. Lamb chops were my favorite food. So I did not want to make this connection between this sheep that I loved and lamb chops. I didn't really want to know about what I've just showed you. And yet, I also did really want to know, because I didn't want to participate in that if I didn't have to. So how did I find out that there were vegetarians in the world? Well, ironically, I found out because of my love of Star Trek. Are there any Star Trek fans in here? Oh, not that many of us. What's wrong with the rest of you? So, just kidding. I was introduced to the concept of vegetarianism by Mr. Spock. Now, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, do you know who Mr. Spock is? Okay, good. I'm seeing people raise nod. So Mr. Spock, he was on the first Star Trek series, and he's a Vulcan, and Vulcans are logical and they have no emotions. And Mr. Spock was a vegetarian. Why was Mr. Spock, this logical, non-emotional character, a vegetarian, while Captain Kirk and the rest of the crew were not vegetarians? Because Mr. Spock thought it was illogical to cause suffering and death to sentient animals for no other reason than to please one's taste buds. That's why he was vegetarian. So that's how I got introduced to vegetarianism. So one day when I was in high school, I went home and I told my mother that I was thinking about becoming a vegetarian because I loved animals and I didn't want to hurt them. The truth is, I didn't want to stop eating them either because I loved meat. So no sooner had I said that I was thinking about becoming a vegetarian than I added, but I guess they're already dead, right? So it doesn't really matter. Well, my mother did not want me to be a vegetarian, so she did not disabuse me of this faulty logic, and she and I conveniently decided to ignore the laws of supply and demand, or consider that by eating meat, I was just paying somebody to do something that I would never do myself, which was kill my friends for no other reason than because I liked the taste of them. So it took me several more years, not until I was a sophomore in college, till I decided that I wasn't going to eat at least mammals and birds anymore. And then it took me another half dozen years till I stopped eating sea animals, and then another year before I stopped eating dairy and eggs. So my journey to being the vegan I am today, and have been now for 25 years, it did take quite a while. It took a while because I didn't really want to give up something that I liked. I wasn't ready to confront the truth that I was allowing my desires to eclipse my values. But then I became a humane educator, and I began teaching about these issues. And over the years, I realized that trying to do the most good and the least harm through all my choices, from what I ate and what I wore and the products I bought and the work I did, how could I do the most good and the least harm to myself, to other people, to animals, and the environment? And that had become the guiding principle of my life. And I call it the MOGO principle, MOGO being short for most good. And I believe that it's really important that each of us strives to live our lives in a way that does the most good and the least harm. And how can we do that when we eat? Well, we can do it by asking and then seeking the answers to the questions of how our choices affect others. So we are going to do that with a little activity that I call True Price. True Price is an activity I do in schools and that lots and lots of people are doing now in living rooms and on their own, in which we ask questions of an everyday item. So here we've got a fast food cheeseburger, and here are the questions that we're going to ask and answer about a fast food cheeseburger. The first question that True Price asks is this a want or a need? Now, we all need to eat, so food is definitely a need, but is a fast food cheeseburger a want or a need? How many of you think it's a want? Anybody think it's a need? Can any of you think of a time, or for some people for whom it could be a need? Yes. Okay, so if you haven't eaten in days and it's the only thing that's available and you're somewhere else, could be a need. For whom could it be a need in this country? Yes. Okay, somebody who's poor, right? So this food item is about $1, okay? And it packs a lot of calories for that $1. Where I live, an organic apple is $1. And you'll get about 100 calories from that. So if you're really poor, that could be perceived as a need. But for the vast majority of people, that's a want. Now, why am I asking that question and why am I belaboring this? Because it's really important to be able to distinguish our wants from our needs, because we may have different criteria when we're fulfilling a want than when we're meeting a need. So if it were necessary, for example, for me to eat animals or animal products in order to survive, I would do so. But if it's not necessary, I can't justify it. I can't justify causing harm if I don't have to. So that's how I distinguish those things. So whenever I do true price, I just think it's important to be asking, is this a want or is this a need? And the reason why is, how many of you have a cell phone? How many of you have a car? How many of you have a computer? How many of you have all three? Okay, a lot of us have all three. How many of you want to support the decimation of the gorilla population in Africa? Okay, nobody wants to support that. How many of you want to support a genocide perpetrated on people? Nobody wants to support that. What about child slaves who are forced to be soldiers? Nobody wants to support that. How about civil war? Anybody want to be supporting civil war with your choices? Okay, none of us want to be complicit in those things. And yet, there is an ore that is in all of our electronics called coltan, and much of it is mined in the Congo, where the mining is contributing to all of those things. But how many of you, in order to do your work, actually need a computer or a car? So I have a different criteria in what I'm willing to accept for my computer, my car, and for certain foods, because I cannot find a computer yet or a cell phone yet that is really produced in a sustainable way, where I can be sure that it's produced in a sustainable and humane way toward people and animals and the environment. But I can make those choices when it comes to my food. And if I can, I'm going to. So that's why that question is important. The next question is, what are the effects, both positive and negative, of this item on you as an individual consumer, on other people, on animals, and on the environment? So let's go through this very briefly. And we're not, I mean, you know, a cheeseburger could be somebody's dissertation, right? We could take a whole course in a cheeseburger and we would still only be touching the surface of these questions. But I want to go through this activity because I want you to have it at your fingertips when you leave here tonight. So, what's a positive effect of a fast food cheeseburger on you? What would be a positive on you as an individual consumer? Convenient. Okay, it's convenient. I've seen so many McDonald's since I've been here in just one city. So it's very convenient. What else? Okay, it packs a lot of calories for the buck. It's inexpensive. Filling. What else? Of course, I'm in the wrong group here to say delicious, but when I was doing this activity at Kaimuki High School today, one of the students said it tastes good. So for a lot of people, that tastes good. So what about negative effects on the individual consumer? What's a negative effect on somebody?
Cholesterol.
Okay, cholesterol, very high in cholesterol.
Packs a lot of calories.
Packs a lot of calories, so eaten in quantity, it contributes to weight gain, obesity. Okay, so hormones, pesticides, maybe antibiotic residues, yes. Growth hormones, yes.
No fiber.
No fiber. Right, and barely any fiber even in the bun because it's so processed. Anything else? What are the other negative consequences? Yes. Yes, that's a very good point. So if if you're trying to feed a big family, it certainly would be cheaper to just buy rice and beans and cook it. But if you're the parent who's working 3 jobs, barely eking out an existence, you may not have time to cook and shop. So it can be a vicious cycle for people who are living in extreme poverty. But that's a very good point. So this food eaten in quantity can contribute to heart disease and stroke and diabetes and cancers, all sorts of things. So what about on other people? What are some of the positive effects of this item on other people? Can you think of any? What? Yeah, employment. Okay, so the fast food industry, it certainly employs a lot of people. So employment. Of course, it doesn't employ as many people as individual farmers if they weren't, factory farming, so that you had individual farmers with smaller plots of growing crops. But yes, it does employ a lot of people. Yes, okay, so on the one hand, there's employment. On the other hand, a negative is that it's really poor employment, right? And for people who work in slaughterhouses, slaughterhouse work is considered among the most dangerous work in the United States. And so, yes, it's employment, but it's very brutal employment. And so many people who work in slaughterhouses are undocumented immigrants who then can't get health care if anything happens, as it likely will, because it's such dangerous work, particularly with our sped up slaughter lines. Let's move on to the animals. We already talked about a lot of the negatives on animals of this food item. Can you think of any positives on animals of a fast food cheeseburger? I had a student today at Kaimuki who said, well, it's better for the chickens. And you know what? He was right. Because when people eat a hamburger, they're eating a small portion of a big animal. And how many of you know of people who say, oh yeah, I don't eat red meat anymore, but now they eat chicken and fishes, right? Have you heard that? So they're actually contributing to far more animal suffering because they're eating far more animals than if they were to eat beef. So ironically, that kid was right today. What about on the environment? Can you think of a positive effect on the environment of a cheeseburger, fast food cheeseburger? Right. But can you think of a positive effect on the environment? Nobody's ever able to come up with a positive effect on the environment of a fast food cheeseburger. I just, if you think of one, let me know, because nobody can think of one. Negative effects on the environment? Can you think? You just mentioned one. So, okay, it takes so much more land, water, energy, grain to produce a pound of beef. I mean, the estimates are it can take 12 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of beef. So that's not only using up precious grain, but it's using up all the resources to produce that grain, all the land, all the water, all the fuel, all those things. So anything else? Any other impacts on the environment? Yes? Yes, so you have to dispose of all of the waste associated with this, including the packaging waste. And remember, these are drive-thrus, right? So, yes, you can walk to lots of McDonald's, but the whole point of this convenience is that it's a drive-through convenience. So there's those effects on the environment. Yes, Victoria?
Creates more carbon emissions than cars do.
Yes, and the UN has declared animal agriculture a bigger contributor to global warming than even transportation. Paul, what were you going to say? Greenhouse, yes, effect. So huge environmental impact. Yes?
Also,
Yes, so, right, which is a human health hazard, right? So feeding cows to cows has caused mad cow disease. Okay, let's move on to question 3. What are the systems that make this food item so commonplace and inexpensive and easy to get? Yes, the subsidies, like you were, yeah, so you were saying before, this might cost $35. I'm not even sure, it would be really interesting for somebody to really do that study, to trace all the subsidies. But one time, when I asked this question, what are the systems in place that perpetuate this, a member of the audience said capitalism. And I thought, well, that's so funny because really this is a socialist food. Okay, because we subsidize this food. We all subsidize it with our tax dollars. Then we subsidize it again when we get sick from eating this kind of food. So this is not a free market capitalist food. I mean, it might seem like it is in certain ways, and it's certainly part of capitalism, but it's completely subsidized with our tax dollars. So what are some other systems that make it commonplace? Okay, using machines instead of people to do the work, industrialization, what else? Right, so by using undocumented workers, we're exploiting people to have cheap labor in order to keep this cheap. What were you going to say? Yes, so what's the system, what are the systems in place that perpetuate that? Habit, what else? How many of you have seen broccoli advertised on TV? You know, this is what we advertise too. So it's a whole media system. The USDA, that's where we dump this food. We dump it into the school lunch program. We addict kids to this kind of food. All of these systems are in place that perpetuate the SAD diet, the standard American diet. So many, many systems are in place that perpetuate this. What is the answer to the last question? What are alternatives that do more good and less harm? Vegan diet, vegetarian diet, anything else? Well, of course, that's what this group is going to say, a vegetarian vegan diet. When I'm in school, sometimes people will say, well, grass-fed beef or organic beef or something like that. They'll say, you know, these other things. But here, of course, everybody will feel like a vegan diet is the answer to this. And so why did I do True Price with you? Particularly because so many of you know these things, is because I invite you to take this activity home with you and do it with everything you eat, so that you can make choices that do the most good and the least harm. And the reason why I want you to think about other people and the environment and animals is because when we think about doing the most good and the least harm, we should be thinking about everyone, all people, all species, and the environment. Now, I did focus more on animal issues in this particular talk than on the other issues, except when we did True Price. And there's a reason for that. There are so many food fads these days and diets these days, and I have always, for me, come back to the ethical issues of how we treat animals as my reason for being vegan and what I teach about primarily. And here's why. While I think that it's wonderful that a vegan diet is so healthy, and I feel very blessed that this ethical diet I've chosen is also one that is so good for my health, if a vegan diet were not the most good for my health of all diets, I would still be vegan. Because to me, it's not all about how I can do the perfect thing just for Zoe Weil. I want to try and live my life so that it does the most good and the least harm for everybody. So there's lots of different diet fads that keep coming up, like the paleo diet and the eat right for your type diet and Weston Price anti-vegan diet and all of these, the locavore diet, all these different, what I call food fads. And some people think of veganism as a fad. It's not a fad. It's an ethical stance. And you know, then there's the people who say, oh, well, you know, you can't get B12 in a vegan diet, so therefore it's not natural. You know, B12 is an essential micronutrient produced by bacteria, and you can't really get it in a vegan diet. And then all the vegans are rushing to say, well, actually, you know, B12, if you just didn't clean the carrots, you could get it on your carrots in a little bit of dirt, because, you know, B12 is everywhere, and we just live in too hygienic a world, and that's the problem. And so, you know what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because we can take B12 supplements. Because B12 is supplemented in so many foods. It's supplemented because even meat eaters need B12 when they get past a certain age and they have trouble getting it absorbing it from their diet. The fact that we can get it from a supplement, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? But instead, you know, it's like, oh, but it can't be really natural, and what about, then you get the arguments about, you know, what cavemen ate, right, for the paleo diet, and what early ancestors ate, and you've got some people saying, oh, well, the earliest humans, they didn't really eat animals, right? They were basically vegan. And then you have the people saying, no, people were eating animals all the time. Now, the truth is that there's evidence that we have eaten animals and animal products for millennia, right? Insects are animals, you know? Humans ate insects, okay? None of that to me really matters. What matters to me most is how can I live with integrity and cause the least harm? and not get attached to all of these different fads. Now, I am not suggesting that it's not a great thing to tell people how healthy it is to be vegan, because there's lots and lots and lots and lots of evidence that people who eat a vegetarian diet live longer, have less rates of heart disease and other diseases, and all of that is wonderful. But for me, the reason I focused on the animals here is because that's the ethical stance that I take. So I invite you to think about how you can make choices in your life when you eat that to do the most good and the least harm, and to use true price as a way of doing that. Chasm that separates species. Notice the ways in which you're alike. Notice your capacity to communicate with one another. And then the next question to ask yourself is whether you might want to divest from cruelty towards and suffering of other animals able to feel just as much as that dog or cat. So, thank you so much. Thank you for all of the ways in which you are choosing a diet that is healthy and humane and does the most good and the least harm. Thank you for coming out tonight. I come from a very long way away, all the way from Maine, as far as you can get in the United States. So it's really, really nice to have a room full of people who came out to listen and hopefully to think about their choices for the future. So before I close, I want to tell you a little bit about what the Institute for Humane Education has to offer you. The Institute for Humane Education, which I co-founded in 1996, is dedicated to spreading humane education, which explores the interconnected issues of human rights and animal protection and environmental preservation in order to produce a generation of solutionaries. That's our goal as humane educators. So we have lots of free downloadable resources at our website, humaneeducation.org. I have a little postcard there, and I have our sign-up sheet, and I invite you to sign up, and so we can stay in touch with you. We have an e-newsletter, so we have lots of resources if you want to teach about these issues yourself. We also have online courses. We have one for educators called Teaching for a Positive Future, actually two, Teaching for a Positive Future 1 and 2. And then we have one for the general public who want to lead their lives more aligned with their values. That's called A Better World, A Meaningful Life. And it's thanks to that course that I'm here today, because Andrea took that course a couple of years ago, and that sort of was the beginning of this. The workshop on Saturday is a MOGO workshop. MOGO is short for Most Good, so it's the Most Good, Least Harm workshop. It's from 9 to 5, and you'll really get to dig deep and explore how you can live your life aligned with your values, whatever they may be. So, I've talked for an hour but I want to open for questions. So we have time for questions, Lorraine? Yes. Yes. So there's questions about whether you can get enough iron, whether, given that lots of land is not suitable for agriculture, but it's grassland, so therefore we should graze animals. To me, it's enough that there are millions and millions and millions of vegans and vegetarians throughout history who are thriving. And there is so much evidence about the destructiveness of animal agriculture from even, sources like the UN and scientists who are doing these studies. But again, this is, do the research for yourself, and you're going to see a variety of different perspectives. There's no question about that, which is also why I come down to what is my value system? How can I do the least amount of harm? Oh, I just spoke to her, but I did say turn around and I'll scratch your back, and I went like this. I didn't know if she knew what that meant. Her symbolic language was actually not sign language. Sarah did not learn American Sign Language. Sarah learned a symbolic language. So there were little plastic pieces in different colors and shapes that corresponded to words, and she would lay them out and make sentences. So it was different from like Coco the gorilla, who was taught American Sign Language. Well, thank you all so, so very much. And please come over to the table and sign our sign-up sheet. Oh, one more thing. Friend request me on Facebook if you want, Zoe Weil. You can follow me on Twitter, which is at capital ZOE, capital WEIL. And you can also like the Institute for Humane Education on Facebook and follow Humane Education on Twitter as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe Weil, for giving us this wonderfully thoughtful as well as inspiring presentation. I'd like to invite you now to all enjoy some delicious vegan foods provided by the courtesy of Down to Earth. Mahalo to all of you for coming, and have a safe return home. Good night, everyone.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.